Welcome to the chaos sector. We return to the matrix. It's crunch time for both candidates. One is wearing an apron and flipping burgers, while the other one is trying to figure out how to make sure her sentences are complete and coherent in interviews. With a few weeks left before the presidential election, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris make their final efforts in gaining the vote for the next president. But as we have reviewed this election cycle, it is clear who will win this election. We don't have a bias, as we are unplugged from the matrix. Kamala Harris has conceded defeat, but just won't officially do so. We can come to the conclusion that the Democratic Party has run out of gas. I guess they're trying to get everyone to convert to electric-powered vehicles, right? Well, I don't think it's going to work. Before we get to all of that, let's address a recent report by the USA Today. Quote, exclusive poll, Harris and Trump tied amid battle for Latino and Black voters. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are essentially tied as they head into the final stretch of the presidential campaign. An exclusive USA Today, Suffolk University poll finds, as the Democratic ticket scrambles to command the strong enthusiasm of Latino and Black voters. The survey puts Harris at 45% and Trump at 44%, a closer race than the poll found in August. Then, in the wake of the Democratic National Convention, Vice President Harris led the former president by 5 percentage points, 48% to 43%. I'm not too fond of either candidate, but if have to, I'd vote for Donald Trump, said Jacob Rosso, a 24-year-old college student from Oklahoma City, saying it had been a difficult decision. He was among those surveyed. I just feel that he's been more clear on his policies and what he wants to do. I'm still unsure of Kamala's plan for the country. Unquote. Briefly, we've stated this over, and other critics of Harris's campaign. Harris's lack of policy depth had led to voters becoming more apprehensive to vote for her. We all know why she lacks the depth. We saw it in the Fox interview with Bret Baier. When a voter is watching Harris in the interview being asked about the administration and their failures, yet she continues to shift focus onto her political opponent, they determine that she is not capable of acknowledging her own mistakes. Trump isn't all that humble neither, as he wants to be right all the time. But the difference is his mistakes aren't as damaging. Nobody is perfect. And that's the point. Harris's inability to admit the administration's failures gives people the sense that she isn't honest. Well, at least honest enough as a politician to be supported and elected as the next president. But let's continue. Quote, the poll of 1,000 likely voters, taken by landlines and cell phone on October 14th through the 18th, has a margin error of plus or minus 3.1 percentage points. By double digits. Voters said Harris hadn't done enough to explain the specific policies she would pursue in office, 57% to 37%. Those who want to hear more include nearly 1 in 4, or 23% of her supporters. In contrast, those surveyed split evenly, 49% yes to 48% no, on whether Trump had done enough to explain his policies. Just 15% of his supporters want to hear more about what he would do. In the 7 weeks between the two polls, Harris has lost ground among Latino voters, who now support Trump 49% to 38%. Wow, that's a huge deficit for the Latino voters. Black voters have also not shown the same support. They favor Harris 72% to 17%, a 55-point advantage that is well below where Democrats traditionally fare. The margins of error for the small subsamples of Latinos and Black voters are plus or 9 points, a potential shift of up to 18 points one way or the other. And other recent polls show Harris in a stronger position, including a lead among Hispanics. In 2020, Democrat Joe Biden's victory relied on overwhelming support from both groups. A Pew Research Center analysis concluded that he was backed by 92% of Black voters and 59% of Latino voters. Okay, what these reports need to make sure they do is clarify these large margins because it's misleading. 92% is not the Black community as a whole. That is a specific gender in the Black community. And to be honest, the media and other news outlets need to establish that old Joe's support from Black voters was in fact a negotiation, not based on policies or genuine appeal to the candidate. Again, we'll keep pointing this out. LaTosha Brown, co-founder of Black Votes Matter, negotiated a deal with old Joe and Democrats that for them to back him and Democrats, he needed to select a black woman as his vice president. Of course, they would vote Democrat anyway. It was a political ruse. In fact, put that into perspective. What if old Joe respectfully declined? Is Latasha Brown suggesting the organization wouldn't have voted, let alone voted Democrat, that presidential election? Yeah, right. That has to be factored into those statistics because it could persuade voters to support a candidate by peer group association. You see, if a likely black voter sees that 72% of other black voters support Kamala Harris, they will be inclined to sway in that direction due to using what they assume is rationale into why such a high percentage of black voters support Harris. But if that black voter sees that only specific gender makes up that high percentage, then they research into why that gender supports the candidate at such a high percentage, but not the other gender. We call this, wait for it, context. And that's what these articles need to practice: contextual analytics or contextual data. It is supplementary information that provides a deeper understanding of the circumstances in which the data was collected or analyzed. Now, let's break this down a bit more, because in politics, in regards to these surveys and polls, they do not practice contextual analysis. Especially on the left, let's be honest.
Number 1, accuracy and relevance. Data without context can lead to misinterpretation and misinformation. When you understand the context, you can determine whether the data is accurate and relevant to the issue at hand. Number 2, informed decision-making. Contextual data empowers better decision-making. It helps you see the potential implications and consequences of choices based on data. Without context, decisions may be misguided and lead to unfavorable outcomes. Number 3, problem solving. When you encounter challenges and problems, understanding the context allows you to identify root causes and design effective solutions. It's like solving a puzzle. Context pieces help complete the picture. Number 4, preventing bias. Without context, data can be easily misused to support preconceived notions or biases. Contextual information can help prevent confirmation bias and encourage more objective analysis. Number 5, clearer communication. Contextual data is essential for effective communication. When sharing data with others, providing context ensures that your audience can grasp the significance and relevance of the information. Now, the key to contextual data analysis is number 4. You have to provide context to the 92% of the black vote for Joe Biden in the previous election, because nationally, it would appear that he literally got the entire black population to vote for him, right? But when you give context with the supporting data analysis, you discover that that 92% is primarily black women. And it was essentially unofficial numbers, as without the negotiation to select a black woman as vice president, based on what Latasha Brown demanded, Biden wouldn't have gotten that support, right? In fact, Brown even stated this herself, claiming that Biden was, quote, dead in the water in regards to his chances at beating Donald Trump. So those votes, which represent the 92% of black voters for Joe Biden, needs context to prevent biases that would arise, as voters see such a large percentage of support, which may lead to influence in voting for a particular candidate or political party.
Precisely. There is dishonest reporting, journalism, and surveys being completed that do not provide context into what are the facts about this election. We all know this, of course, but when this is carried out, which is a form of damage control, it creates a perception of how the presidential election is viewed by voters, which may not be true. For example, later in the article, there is a question of who represents change the most. Quote, the poll had some encouraging findings for Harris. She now edges Trump 46% to 44%. as the candidate who would do a better job in bringing about change, a crucial asset given wide dissatisfaction with the country's direction. She is favored by double digits, 48% to 31%, as the candidate better able to heal the nation's political divisions. Unquote. Only a 2-point margin when it comes to who would do a better job in bringing about change, yet a 17-point margin in who is able to heal the nation's political divisions? It's essentially the same question, yet a drastic difference in percentage margin. So there needs to be context to those numbers. Bringing about change. Exactly what change are they referring to? Political divisions? Socioeconomic policies? Education? Foreign policies? Women's rights? I mean, change can be stated all day, every day. But just like the candidate has to explain what change they are bringing, surveys have to explain exactly what change those participants provided as support for either candidate. And let's be honest, Harris isn't more capable of healing the nation's political divisions when she's a part of a political party that has literally tried to impeach and imprison her political opponent for the last 8 years. And even though she hasn't stated this, she has slated Trump a threat to democracy. Trump has had his share of mudslinging, but it's obvious more Republicans are willing to reach across the aisle than Democrats are. Harris is not capable of healing the nation's political divisions because she can't even heal herself from, well, herself. Harris is incapable of holding herself accountable for the failures of this administration. So how can she possibly bring everyone together when she can't even bring herself to admitting she failed the American people? There is a video of Trump in one of his rallies where he became emotional. The mainstream media has perhaps tried to bury that video, but Valuetainment had Trump on his show, and I believe it's titled, quote, "I'm not emotional, I'm angry." But in that clip, the host showed him one of his rallies from the past, and he was clearly emotional. And as American citizens viewing that emotion, but the strength to stand strong as a leader by holding back those tears, is a representation of bringing the nation together. That is strength, that is leadership. And although we do not support Trump, and he is a part of the political matrix, there is still a soul that burns in that man's life. There are genuine people in the matrix. Some of them fight the good fight. Others lay down and become subservient, while others try to stay as neutral as possible. Donald Trump still has a soul, in my opinion, and that life breathing in his body, despite his role in the political matrix, is real. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, is empty of a soul. She is empty of life. And that's the stark difference. It could be due to a variety of reasons. Maybe she's just like her father, too bold. Maybe it's her background, growing up middle class in San Francisco, which is not the common representation of the middle class. It's a liberal far-left circus, out of touch with reality. This is why she always seems so socially awkward, because Harris is not used to being around, quote, normal people. Everyone was either far-left, wacky liberals, a celebrity, or some elected official. But the American people as a whole, she has never truly associated with the common folk. And this is how you weed out the gaslighting and articles that seem to present, quote, nonpartisan reporting. Let's continue though. Quote, "But Trump has made a concerted bid for the votes of Hispanic and Black voters, especially men, focusing on the economy and crime." Fact check, this is not true. Trump is not especially trying to court Black and Hispanic male voters. Those Black and Hispanic male voters are leaning towards him anyway, so of course there will be engagement. These little bits thrown into the article create narratives. His success at the eroding the Democrats' typical advantage has raised alarm in Harris's camp, and a rebuke on the stump from former President Barack Obama of Black men, who he said might be reluctant to vote for a woman. Okay, now this is how we prove that the 92% of Black voters for Old Joe were all women, or at least in the high 80s of that percentile. Black men and Black women didn't support Harris in her initial or official presidential campaign. Okay, then Trump got 8% of the Black vote, and Old Joe got 92% of the Black vote. There's your statistical data, my friends. So if we apply this narrative by Obama to the previous election, no Black men supported at any point in her political career. That's just verification. Anywho, Harris, who has been bolstering campaign events and ads targeting Latino and Black voters in swing states, released an economic agenda for Black men last week. It included small business loans and a promise to legalize recreational marijuana use. The candidate's standings overall continue to be defined by gender. Trump leads among men, 53% to 37%. A mirror image of Harris's lead among women, 53% to 36%. Unquote. And there you have it, the classic divide and conquer of politics. More so, what political affiliation do both genders have? Because if we're putting this into context, it is suggesting that men are voting for Trump for the economy, the border, and jobs as the primary focus, while women are voting for Harris for essentially one issue, and that's women's rights. Because no woman is voting for Harris for economic policies, definitely not the border, and jobs are associated with those issues. Here's our mock polling on the key issues. The economy, we have Trump with a 65 to 35% lead. Immigration, Trump with an 85 to 15% lead. Yes, it's that bad. Foreign policy, Trump with a 75 to 25% lead. She doesn't care about foreign policy. as she skipped the congressional speech from a foreign ally. Then we have women's rights, Harris with a 60 to 40% lead. But this is centered around abortion. As every other women's rights issue, Harris actually doesn't defend, such as women's sports and young girls and their rights to protection of their feminine spaces in recreational activities. If you don't protect this, then how exactly are you defending women's rights? So although the optics regarding women's rights appears to favor Harris by a large margin, again, going back to contextual analysis, she doesn't defend women's rights as a whole. And you factor in Trump's moderate stance with his vow to defend women's and girls, believe it or not, we would say Trump leads Harris like 54% to 46%. On a side note, it would be interesting to find out which gender is aborted the most, right? I'm assuming it would be males. And one that isn't really talked about from either candidate is education, and Trump with a 55 to 45% lead. Harris is an advocate of schools teaching children about gender affirmation indoctrination, sexual orientation, and the most frightening is child pornographic authors such as Maya Kobabe literally publishing explicit novels to children, which are approved by school boards in various states across the country. That pervert is from her hometown of San Francisco, and we've never heard Harris condemn this criminal activity, but we've heard Trump condemn it. Children should not be exposed to sex, sexual orientation, gender, or gender identity. And it's that simple. Their education has transformed into communist indoctrination, where anyone who opposes it are penalized. A teacher who speaks out against it is often suspended, or even has their license revoked in that state. Parents are also kept in dark about what their children are being exposed to. And once again, Kamala Harris could have taken a strong stance on the issue in condemning it. But of course, what do you expect with a corrupt politician from San Francisco? So in 5 categories, Trump has a 4-to-1 advantage. But the problem with the gender narrative is Harris has shown based on her current vice presidency and her record that the only thing she actually defends is abortion out of all these other categories. And this doesn't represent women very well, which segues us to her no-show at the Al Smith dinner.
Kamala Harris skipped the Al Smith dinner and instead chose to send a video with a former cast member of Saturday Night Live. It wasn't funny, and it only reiterated that Harris is afraid of being put in unfavorable positions. She doesn't have tough skin, and there's the reason she didn't attend. Furthermore, the very jokes that Trump had would actually make her feel more frightened than having a chuckle or two, like Hillary Clinton did at the event. Because Kamala Harris is currently in the administration that has caused these problems, and since she's running for president, her campaign staff advised her not to attend because it would hurt her campaign. Are you kidding me? If anything, it would give her some likability, believe it or not, because she would be willing to take the heat of her political opponent roasting and criticizing her at the same time. But not attending makes her look weak, fragile, too concerned about her image, and not concerned about what the American people and her constituents anticipated with her attendance. Harris is like a robot, lacking human emotion, afraid of real and authentic human interaction. And I guess it makes perfect sense, because Molly Shannon played a character on Saturday Night Live that was the epitome of Harris politically, socially awkward, and a bit ditzy. And the wacky thing is Kamala Harris in the skit was treating Molly as if she's the odd one, but she's playing a character, not realizing that the American people are looking at Harris in that same eyebrow-raising view of her character. Maybe that was the subliminal message Harris was sending, but just attend the damn event and move on already. Just look at a few key events where she could have shown strength and presidential character. The congressional speech from the Prime Minister of Israel. She decided to skip that event, and instead decides to attend a sorority event, wouldn't take serious interviews throughout, and decided to have one with Fox News, just to make herself appear tough. It didn't help her. It was also a bit too late for that adversarial interview, and her campaign staff swept her out of the interview prematurely anyway. And then you have the annual Al Smith dinner, where each candidate can relax a moment from the pressure of their campaigns. Harris decides to run away from the event out of fear, but makes it appear she's being creative in how she's so-called attending the event. How cowardly. This is not high school, like the character Molly Shannon played on television. This is real life, with fellow Democrats sitting there wishing she would have come to at least have a good time together alongside political adversaries. Even Chuck Schumer was forced to laugh a bit at the event, and Trump was throwing some very serious jokes out there to Democrats. But Schumer sat right next to Trump, endured the pain, and left the event. It has been analyzed by some that Kamala Harris is a bit socially detached, not comfortable in social settings. It's evident she doesn't seem socially comfortable, which is not uncommon. But this is like a social disorder, not a case of being shy or a bit awkward. You know, it could be that Harris may actually be, well, a bit of an alcoholic, or maybe another mental and physical impairment that also creates a distorted perception of reality. Alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs, whatever it is, it's obvious Harris is not in touch with reality. I think those may be a factor, but I think the main reason she skipped that event is because her record would be blasted on the projector screen in the form of Trump's roasting. Harris attempts to criticize Trump for not agreeing to another debate, suggesting he's afraid, coming from someone who's afraid to attend a political comedy show. Her campaign staff knows how sensitive she is to criticism, and they assume Trump would hurt her feelings at the event, which would be the biggest story in this presidential election. So she ran away, like a little kitten, frightened by the slightest noise. It's fitting though, because Harris is in fact an outsider, and Trump is politically social among his constituents, even though they hate him politically. We've come to the conclusion that Harris has conceded defeat and is just floating around taking up time. Old Joe would have at least attended the event. But when it comes to Hollyweird support, to carry the weight of her campaign, Harris has a Rolodex of celebrities to jump around aimlessly providing emotional support that she definitely lacks. Lizzo, Usher, Stevie Wonder, the list goes on and on. Think about it. Democrats use celebrities to motivate American citizens to vote for their candidate. Yet, those celebrities don't represent the American citizens. But they present this ideology or philosophy that the rich and wealthy are the most corrupt and dismissive of the average working class citizen. That would be the very people you use to endorse your fucking candidates. Lizzo, Usher, Stevie Wonder, Oprah Winfrey, Jennifer Garner, Taylor Swift, Julia Roberts, George Clooney, Bruce Springsteen. I mean, all of these people have absolutely no relation to the American people other than making money off of their support. Charities are tax write-offs, and some of them don't pay their taxes. But you want to know why Democrats use Hollyweird so much? Well, for one, they're just as wacky as the Democrats. The reason is simple, just like Harris. Democrats do not relate to the American people without Hollyweird, you see? I mean, it's evident right now. You have one candidate constantly yapping about being raised in a middle-class family, yet is being endorsed by a bunch of rich Hollyweird celebrities. Then, you have a rich celebrity in Trump who is so outrageous, he has the courage and candidacy to go work at McDonald's for a few minutes. Oh, of course, mainstream media so-called fact-checked it and said it was staged. Even if it was staged, the fact that he physically went inside that McDonald's and worked shows how transparent he is with the American people. It was fun for the nation to see, especially those who were in his presence. They actually enjoyed that time with such a silly president. Think about how many workers and residents in that community had a chance to take a photo with Trump. How many children got a chance to take a photo with Trump? How many conversations were had about that experience? This is an example of, get this, a candidate that brought joy to people. Kamala Harris is not fun. She's giving off Hillary Clinton vibes. That being, an old bitter woman who feels she can't win against Trump. Also, of course, it was a jab at Harris for claiming she worked at McDonald's in college, but no location has confirmed it. Not that big of a deal at face value, but when it comes to being honest, it's important. Put into perspective, from the American citizen's view, Harris has tons of celebrities, many very popular and influential celebrities, endorsing her, and you have one video of Trump working at McDonald's. He grabs the attention every time. There is nothing Harris can do to prevent him from getting the nation to look in his direction. Despite the mainstream media's narrative, the American people actually love Donald Trump. She doesn't have that charisma. She doesn't have that creative and innovative personality. She's dead as a doorknob. Where's the far-left wacky liberal excitement? She's 60 years old, but age isn't a problem. We see it with Trump. Kathy Bates in Michigan has more charisma, right? She has that influential political swagger, so to speak. We just saw her put a Dorito chip in some wacko liberal's mouth. Sure, she's a lunatic, but she's not afraid to show how transparent she is. Kamala Harris is very dull, and to make matters worse, her policies are horrific. So what inspires voters to back Harris if her policies are horrible and she's not an exciting candidate? What could it be, you ask? I think you know why she is even getting votes in this race, and it has nothing to do with politics. That's why celebrities are running the show. Her policies are Hollyweird entertainers. Meanwhile, Trump is flipping burgers and gaining more momentum down the stretch. He does things that Harris is too afraid to do. She doesn't have flexibility. And this stiffness is a repeat of his previous female challenger. Hillary Clinton, yes, the same stiffness, rigid, lacking real emotion and compassion. And this stiffness is due to their handlers, making sure they stand at attention and do not deviate from their programming. We see the same characteristics with Kamala Harris, lacking a soul. And you're not going to get any life from celebrities who have already sold theirs.
Yeah, Democrats can't survive without Hollywood support. Think about how demented these wacky talking heads have been in this election cycle. Joyless Reed, who shouldn't have a job at MSNBC, after all the nonsense she has spewed out, does it again in response to the surge that Trump has had over Harris. This psychopath has attacked black and Hispanic male voters for not supporting an incompetent android in Kamala Harris. She's an android whose system needed to be updated before she was thrown out there as the presidential candidate. But you know, Harris's horrific flaws do not mean anything to Joyless Reed. She's a woman of color, so vote for her, or else. Or else what? You're not black. Oh really? Well, who made you the arbiter of what it means to be black? Quote, Joy Reid claims black and brown men joining fascist groundswell as Trump gains momentum. MSNBC host Joy Reid decried former President Donald Trump's support among black and Hispanic voters Monday night, claiming it was creating a fascist groundswell. Okay, wait, this is not what Joyless Reed actually means. We all know what she is saying, and that's those black and brown men are sellouts, as they aren't voting for a Democrat, and a Democrat of color. But Reid tries to hide what she feels, out of anger that the truth will come out in the political matrix. But let's continue. Trump has gained support among both black and Hispanic voters, largely due to his stances on the economy and immigration, as the November election approaches. Okay, again we stop. If Trump is gaining support from both black and Hispanic men due to these policies, what about black and Hispanic women? Don't they care as much as their counterparts about the economy and immigration? Well, in their personal lives, yes, but in the political matrix, they would disregard those concerns to support Harris over Trump, to keep the narrative of racism alive. Here's what she had to say about it all. Quote, in many ways, the disinformation campaign is working. Base Republicans today believe everything, from Democrats secretly manipulating the weather, from a secret base in Alaska, to Trump being incapable of losing this election. He's winning in a landslide. And some Democrats are starting to believe the disinformation too. Have you noticed how sharply the polls have shifted in Trump's favor over the last couple weeks? With these claims that Trump is surging with black and Latino voters and leading in every single swing state, according to secret internal polls, despite all the Hitler talk. Answer your own damn question. Are you suggesting that black and Latino voters somehow are voting for Hitler? He's racist, right? So if he's racist, are you suggesting that those black and Latino voters are ignorant to this fact? This is what happens when your race baiting has reached its limit. There is nothing left to do but keep running to that well, but the water has run dry. Quote, yes, race will be far too close, because unfortunately, we do have a fascist groundswell in parts of this country, mainly among white men, let's be clear, but in small pockets among black and brown men too. You see, insanity. This happens to be a global phenomenon as women become more economically independent and seek positions of power. Unquote. So if Kamala Harris loses, it's black and Hispanic men who are to blame, due to not accepting a woman as a president. Yeah, race baiting isn't working, so let's try gender baiting. Trump hasn't been called racist or Hitler for quite some time, right? They went from calling him racist to an existential threat, to a threat to democracy and such. So by their own rhetoric, they have exonerated Trump from those charges, you see. This is classic from the left. When a group or groups do not adhere to your expected outcome of support, they start to turn on those groups out of frustration. Instead of just admitting that Kamala Harris is just not the right candidate for Democrats, and even for a woman of color, Joyless Reed slanders black and Hispanic men because they won't vote for the android. The moderate Democrats are not afraid to admit Harris is not the right candidate, even a few further left. But it's the wacky liberals and progressives who are scurrying around trying to execute damage control of her lack of support, by claiming there's something wrong with black and Hispanic men for voting for Trump. But this is poetic justice, because now Democrats are reaching out to black and Hispanic men, as they know they'll need those votes just to compete with Trump. Prior to this election, Joyless Reed didn't care about the lack of support black men gave old Joe. Yes, they didn't vote for him. That was 92% of black women. Did Joyless Reed care about the black man's vote? Negative, neither did anyone else on the left. Disregarded them, feeling that such a massive percentage of black women will always keep Democrats in a competitive position. Well, even with the support from black women, the more other groups become prevalent, the more it shows that Democrats only have black women and far-left wackos as their voting base. Meanwhile, black men, Hispanic men, Mexican-American men, Asian men, white men, and other groups of men, always a vote that has to be earned by the Democratic Party. And we can include women in those groups as well.
Typical temper tantrum by the wackos, Joyless Reed has made a career out of obsessing over race in politics. She should be fired immediately. But to my colleague's point, this is how the left stabs you in the back if things start to get too tough. It's a party of opportunists, individuals jockeying for position of power. Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, and Harris stabbed old Joe in the back. And now they're stuck with a DEI presidential candidate who has an anvil on her ankles, preventing her from rising to the occasion. Black and Hispanic men are not supporting Harris. Oh, okay. If she loses, it's their fault, as they align themselves with a fascist white man who is a threat to democracy. So now black and Hispanic men are misogynists who wouldn't dare vote for a woman to be president. Oh, okay, that's the angle. They always find something. It doesn't matter if it has no actual merit based on facts. The Democrats will throw it out there as damage control. It's an excuse, but everyone knows how pathetic Joyless Reed sounds. And peel back another layer. Reed is essentially saying that black and Hispanic men are complicit with this fascist white man who will threaten democracy for not only the entire nation and the world, but a threat to their lives as a result also. So now these men are a reflection of Trump. Joyless Reed represents the makeup of the Democratic Party, a bunch of corrupt black women who conspired with the Democratic Party since the 1960s. Black men never settled with Democrats. They became a bit more apolitical. It's the biggest conspiracy in politics if you ask me. Every election year, black women go out and vote for a Democrat no matter what. Democrats receive 80 to 90% of the black vote from black women. That's absurd. Think about it. Out of all races in the country and genders, black women are the only gender and race that exclusively vote Democrat. Not only do they exclusively vote Democrat, the percentage is almost 100%. This is not normal. So obviously this is not about a candidate. This is not about policy. This is a conspiracy. Power. It's about political power. But it's also about covering up the truth about racism. You see, if that percentage was more like 50 to 60%, then by default, you would have more independent and even Republican black women. That, of course, destroys the narrative that Republicans are racist, you see. But then there's more. Spike Lee decides to chime in as well, echoing similar rhetoric. Quote, Spike Lee tells black Trump voters to get their mind straight. Some of my brothers have been drinking that Kool-Aid. Filmmaker Spike Lee urged black voters backing former President Donald Trump to get their minds straight before the election, telling them they are drinking the Kool-Aid. Lee joined Ari Melber on MSNBC's The Beat to discuss the election, and Melber at one point asked about Trump's appeal among men. Quote, I'm curious what you would say to people who look at this. We've heard a lot about cutting people up into groups, which on this program we discussed the limitations of that. But on the one hand, it is white men who are skeptical of Kamala Harris. It is white and Latin men that are breaking towards Trump. Black men in this country. Melber began before laughingly cut in. Quote, I know what the question is. Continue. Melber joined in on the laughter and told his guest to run with the question if he had the gist. Well, it's sad but true. Some of my brothers have been drinking that Kool-Aid, and I just hope that they get their minds straight, get their minds right in time for this election. If they're conscious, if they're aware there's nothing that this guy can do that's going to put us, not just black folks, but Americans, in a better position going forward. Unquote. This is all a bunch of garbage. Black men aren't listening to Spike Lee. And I would give them some advice. Don't even respond to him on social media, because that's all he wants anyway. They already have, but it's not making or breaking Spike Lee. So there's no point in responding to him. He's on a network with the culture appropriating Ari Melber, who uses black people to boost his ratings. They keep dumping out these celebrities, thinking that the American people are listening to them. They're not. Donald Trump works at McDonald's flipping burgers and cooking French fries. That's what the American people are focusing on. Hollywood celebrities have always been jealous of Trump because he takes all of the attention away from them and their influence. Anywho, quote, Lee praised former President Barack Obama for going hard against black males considering voting for Trump. Obama directly spoke to black men hesitant to support Vice President Kamala Harris while campaigning for her earlier this month. Yeah, the same Obama who wanted a primary and didn't think Harris was even qualified to be vice president, let alone run for president. The former president said a lack of enthusiasm for Harris seems to be more pronounced with the brothers. Okay, why do you think there's a lack of enthusiasm? Let me take a wild guess here. Is it because Harris has the personality of a doorknob? Or how about the fact that she sounds a bit incompetent when she's asked questions in interviews? Or how about the policies she has proposed? Or what about her current role as vice president, a part of an administration that led to record high inflation, mass illegal immigration, and wars? Do you think those black men would be enthusiastic about voting for this person? Oh, I get it. she's a woman and a woman of color. So they're supposed to ignore all of her failures and flaws, right? Well, black women do it. So black men need to get on board and do the same. Anywho, quote, I gotta give credit to President Obama because he's been going really hard on the brothers. Some might think too hard, but I don't think so. We got to wake up, and don't go for the okey doke, the flim flam. Can't do that. We got to support our sister. Unquote. All celebrity political propaganda. No real concern for the people he's trying to manipulate. It's insanity, and what's even more insane, as we've mentioned before, is how Democrats wouldn't be praising Obama if he was a Republican. You know why? Because black people wouldn't have voted for him if he was, despite being in the position to be the first black president at that time. If Donald Trump was a Democrat, all of these Hollywood celebrities and mainstream media would be groveling at his feet, giving him the shoe shine treatment. Black men are not voting for Kamala Harris. They're voting for Trump, and Democrats have a major problem on their hands, including black women. As we pointed out, either black women will stop voting 90% for Democrats and spread that vote out to other political parties, or they will go down with ship. Sad thing is, Kamala Harris was a karmic lesson. All of the damage control of sexism and racism, none of this will concern the average American citizen. They'll be happy their grocery costs will go down. Cost of living will go down, gas prices will go down, and tax cuts for all American citizens. Who knows? Trump might propose to give another stimulus package, something this administration could have done, since they are responsible for the economic hardships of the country. In conclusion, Harris will lose. Trump will get reelected. Mainstream media will behave like 5-year-olds, and everyone will make fun of it. There may be another assassination attempt. Surely Democrats will try to impeach him, and McDonald's will make a lot of money next year because Trump will make it a national tour day. After it's all said and done, Harris makes appearances wearing casual clothes after losing the presidential election, claiming it was sexism and racism all jumbled up in a new form of salads being tossed out there. An excuse salad. This is the Chaos Sector.